Welcome to the second to last episode for this year's Lit Month, and the actual reason why I decided to make September literary or, Lit Month, the banned book week special, because for those of you who may not know, the last week of September is celebrated as banned book week for libraries and school libraries to bring attention to the basically as a counter censorship effort. And the book that I will be discussing is was not only listed as number 36 for the decade of 1990 to 1999, but was actually a book that I had read as a Christian, and then later after I deconverted. And so I'm gonna kind of focus on my reactions to this work, when I read it, and my current opinion on the book. It's got its own Hulu series. I haven't seen the Hulu series, so I'll only be discussing the book. I don't really have internet, and Hulu isn't really something you can watch without internet. So, but for those of you who haven't caught on, I am referencing Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. And it's pardon me, I'm kind of starting to come down with a little something, maybe, so that's why my voice sounds kind of wonky, and why I'll probably be pausing to take drinks throughout this video. But this is kind of the climax, what have you, to Lit Month, so it wouldn't really feel right to postpone this. So, for those of you who aren't aware or who haven't read it, The Handmaid's Tale portrays as it's a dystopian novel, which portrays a renamed United States where, under basically an extreme vaguely Christian-ish Sharia theocratic rule called the Republic of Gilead. Now, and the reason why it's called The Handmaid's Tale is because in this structure there are wives, and then there are, servants called Marthas, and then there are handmaids, which are basically walking uteri for those who are rich enough to warrant the access to increased chances for procreation. And for those of you who are followers of Sirs the Skeptics channel, and the myriad of videos he's done smashing his head against the wall that is biblical gender roles. Biblical gender roles actually does have an article on the world, you know, portrayed in The Handmaid's Tale. I'd go over it as part of this video, but I do not have the time nor the storage capacity to do so. So I'm gonna, drop a link to the article if you're that much of a masochist, in the description. And I'm gonna give you the TLDR. BGR likes the control over women, but BGR doesn't like that they take what they view as the rights of the husband away and give it to the government and the persecution of other sects of Christianity. Meanwhile, Plugged In, while their article for the book is basically just a list of everything that someone could possibly take issue with, it's basically a detailed synopsis of the book without any authorial or reviewer opinions. Though there is a disclaimer noting that they do not, confirm or deny any literary merit that the book may have. I don't know if that's standard for all their reviews, but it seemed a bit prominently displayed right at the tail end of the article. In the article for the Hulu series, which if you so Plugged In is run by Focus on the Family. I'm probably working my way towards doing a video on Focus on the Family as basically a propaganda producer for evangelicals, because every time I look, it's them or Tyndale House, and they're very closely connected with Tyndale House Publishing. It almost, like, when I look at what I was exposed to growing up, it would almost always tie back in some sort of way from Focus on the Family. But that's a bit of a tangent, because the joy of unscripted videos is lots and lots and lots of tangents. But so while they don't have any, reviewer opinions in their book reviews, in the review for the Hulu series, they claim, they decry how it portrays Christianity. And in a lot of the reason, the calls for restriction and censorship of, The Handmaid's Tale in the US, though the vast majority is with language and, portrayal of violence or, or things of a sexual nature. There are several complaints which do say this should be banned because it's anti-Christian. And to my regret, when I had first read this book as a senior in high school, I had read it as part of a course where, we split up into groups, and, we basically, the groups were formed by which books we picked. Well, we picked books out of a list, and by the time I'd gotten to that course, I had already read most of the books on the list for fun. So, and by the time I had gotten up to pick, it was kind of between Handmaid's Tale and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was already pretty full as a group, so I went ahead and went with the Handmaid's Tale. And as a still highly indoctrinated evangelical, Pentecostal, I hated The Handmaid's Tale. It's like this whole society is getting practically every word of the Bible wrong. They're misinterpreting every fucking scripture that they use to try and set up their society. Now, once again, this is me as an evangelical saying this. This is the state of mind I had when I read it the first time. And I finished the book. I worked, I wrote little journals making very plainly clear the issues that I had with this book. Talking about how, they used the Rachel Leah story as why they do the handmaid thing, and that wasn't actually divinely, inscribed. That was a story about sibling rivalry, essentially. Once again, this was my opinion back then. And I had hated The Handmaid's Tale with a passion. I was like, okay, I read this. I'm never going to read this book again, etc. Now, fast forward several years, where I had to, basically, I kind of did a English GED, a British English, a UK GED sort of course, to try and get acceptance to a British university so I could, live with my, then fiance, now wife. And the English course that they had, which I was taking, had a sci-fi section. And the two books in the sci-fi section were Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and then The Handmaid's Tale. And even then, I was dreading The Handmaid's Tale portion. Because as I was getting up, because I still had the, even though I was largely deconverted, I still had the memories of how much I hated that book. And so I read through The Handmaid's Tale again, once again as part of a course. I've never actually read it for leisure. And I read through it again, and I'm like, okay, I get it. That I probably won't ever enjoy reading The Handmaid's Tale. But that's because it reminds me of who I was. I can see how something like the more extreme conservative sects could lead to the U.S. becoming something like The Handmaid's Tale. And it's like looking at who I was in a funhouse mirror. And it's uncomfortable. And it's ugly. But that's how it's supposed to be. It's like you don't you don't necessarily read books like The Handmaid's Tale or 1984 because they're enjoyable. You read them to take a look at what kind of a world is portrayed there and how it came, how it came to be, how it's a warning sign. And it's like, you do not want to live here unless you're biblical gender roles, or, or at least a version of, seriously, if, if I'd ever get the ability to, and if enough people ask for it, I will go through their article. And you can watch me bash my head against that wall of spikes. But yes, you don't want, you don't want to live in a strict theocracy that basically defines the worth of, the worth of a woman by whether or not she can pump out babies. And you do not want to live, you don't want to live in a strict theocracy one way or the other. And that's, that's the point of the book. It's like, look at this, and unfortunately, it's one of the biggest downsides of the book. It's because the people who really, really, really need to understand what the message of this piece of art are the people who are in deep enough that either they'll just say, oh, that's just flagrantly wrong, and just disregard it and just hate the book. Or people are like, yeah, that is a good idea. I mean, we should just like tweak a couple of things to make sure that, we still keep our, us men still keep our rights. But yeah, let's get out the white hats and the red dresses. So the people who really need to look at how ugly a world under, strict fundamentalist Christian theocracy are like the exact kind of people who would just miss the message. And it's a shame. It is a damned shame. And so I'm going to go ahead and say, like, if you liked this, leave a comment, share it out, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And as always, remember, indoctrination is a hell of a drug.